From the television studios of North Carolina A&T State University, this is TRC Talk, a cable access show presented by the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of TRC Talk. I'm Myra Sherd, your host. Today we have in the studio Dr. Emily Harwell. Dr. Harwell is the Research Director for the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Welcome, Dr. Harwell. Thanks a lot for coming out.
Well, thanks for having me.
If it's okay, I'd like to call you Emily.
Please.
Thank you. Now tell us a little bit about your background. I think that's the way we start most of our shows, so our audience is waiting to hear from you.
Okay. I have a PhD in anthropology and environmental studies from Yale University. And that the environmental studies angle may seem like a curious one to bring to the Truth Commission, but the way it happened was that I had originally gone to Peace Corps in South America, in Paraguay, in the late 80s and early 90s, and was working on agroforestry in a small farming community in Paraguay, and got very interested in social justice issues, and particularly in the developing world where livelihood is such an important issue, and got very interested in how natural resources and the environment figured into that, and how politics and economic injustice was working into environmental problems. And as a result, came back to the United States following the close of my Peace Corps service, and started a graduate career in environmental studies and anthropology. And I went to Indonesia and lived in a longhouse, an indigenous longhouse in Borneo for about 2 years, I guess, and was very interested in ethnicity and the differences in the idea of law around how people manage their natural resources. So I got very interested in the idea of different alternative views of the law and community justice, and was very interested in how people view wrongs in the community in different kinds of ways and having different kinds of harms, and the way that they look at how to rectify those kinds of community damages that may be damages against one person, but it affects the entire community. So I got very interested in that, and as a result of that, and while I was doing my dissertation work, and this was in the late 90s, an ethnic conflict broke out in Borneo involving one of the indigenous groups that I was working with. And I got to know a lot of the human rights activists, both in Indonesia and also international activists, and wound up doing some work for Human Rights Watch on human rights violations in association with the pulp and paper industry. So I still sort of hanging on to that environmental angle. And as a result of that, got very interested in the East Timor Truth Commission. I had met all of the human rights people that were getting involved in that initiative in the, I guess this was around 2000 is when they were first getting up off the ground. And they needed somebody who had experience with putting together a large research project, somebody who had a lot of social science background. By then I had had a lot of human rights law experience as well in my work at Human Rights Watch. So I came on as an international advisor to the research, the truth-seeking department is what they call it there, to help them figure out exactly what it was that they were trying to research, to recruit and train Timorese researchers, to oversee the work that they were doing. And I came in later last year as they're trying to wrap up their work and trying to put out their final report, and did some work for them, doing some research of my own and also writing up for the final report and helping them do some of the hard work of the editing, which is, you know, where a lot of heartbreak happens, where you want to put a lot of stuff in, but it still has to be a document that will be accessible to a lot of folks. So I've sort of had experience on on a lot of angles of truth-seeking work for a Truth Commission, at least one other Truth Commission in East Timor, although they're very different. But.
Well, that's great. That sounds like you really do bring a wealth of knowledge to this project. And based on the things that you've done with the East Timor Commission, could you talk about that in relation to what you're doing here in Greensboro?
Sure. The East Timor Commission was, in many ways, different than what we're doing here because they were looking at a 25-year span of Indonesian occupation of East Timor. I don't know how much background you want in the whole East Timor situation, because there's obviously a big history book to be written about that. But there were 25 years of Indonesian occupation of a very small, very poor country. And it was a very brutal occupation, and there were a whole range of very serious human rights violations that took place over that 25-year period that was punctuated in 1999 when they finally got a referendum to vote for independence. And there was a huge backlash against them. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed and displaced. So the scale of what we were trying to do there was very different. And we're both in time and just in the severity of the violations. But I think part of what we're trying to do that's similar is to really look at the context in which some violence has happened, and look at the things that led to it, and make recommendations to the government and to civil society, to various non-governmental organizations, to the community at large, about how to go about making sure that those kinds of violent outbreaks don't happen again. So I think the sort of spirit of what we're trying to do in East Timor and what we're trying to do in Greensboro is similar. One of the other differences is that part of the problem in East Timor is there's so many crimes, and there was the backlash is in the process of the backlash in 1999 in East Timor. They completely wrecked the government, destroyed the buildings. All of the government officials fled to Indonesia. So they really had to start from scratch in terms of starting up their government. So there really wasn't a justice system through which all of these hundreds of thousands of cases could be processed. So there was part of the reason for the Truth Commission in East Timor was to sort of figure out a way to address these harms that have been done to the community, because the justice system wasn't capable of doing it. And here, I think, obviously, there were 3 trials. The justice system did address this, although many people feel unsatisfied by the result. So it's an issue that I think is doesn't mean to sort of override the justice system, but means to sort of look at what a justice system can and can't do, and what kinds of dissatisfaction and harms remain in the community as a result of a justice system that doesn't really address a community wrong. It addresses individual wrongs that were done by individual people against individual people. So that's a longstanding interest of mine, is to look at justice issues from a broader standpoint.
And to be pinpointed about this, exactly how are you researching justice?
Well, our research has sort of, the way I think about it and the way I explain it to people is it has sort of 2 prongs to it. And one is a sort of fact-finding prong that looks at exactly what happened, both on November 3rd, the immediate lead into November 3rd, which primarily is a demonstration in China Grove by the CWP party and some of their supporters against a screening of Birth of a Nation in China Grove by the Klan and some members of the Nazi Party. There's a confrontation there that had some very direct links to November 3rd. And also the trials, looking at exactly what happened in the trials, and what kinds of charges were made, what kind of evidence was used, how were decisions made. There's quite a lot of trial documents. There's a huge amount of paperwork that we're going through to try to get a handle on that. There's a lot of sworn testimony that we're looking at. There's a lot of people who say, well, it's been 25 years, we can't remember what happened. But there is quite a lot of sworn testimony in the immediate aftermath. So there's, a lot of those fresh details are recorded in the archive. So that's a big task that we're working on, and we also have some law students who are working on that as well. So that's one prong, the sort of fact-finding issue that we're trying to develop as best we can, a accurate public record of what happened. And the other thing that we're trying to do is to try to shed some light on the diversity of interpretations of those facts, or diversity of experiences of those facts and how people sort of came to this differently, how they see the causes differently, how they think it affected them and their community differently, how they even found themselves to be on the corner of Everett and Carver on that day, feeling those feelings that they were feeling. They bring their own personal history and their own community history to that. And that's part of how the violence happened, or how conflicts in general happen, is that people have different perspectives. So in that aspect of the research, we're not trying to sort of verify stories and come to the one true story. We're actually, the diversity is the point. We're trying to show that people have a variety of views on this, and to understand that people are coming from it from a different standpoint, that it's not, here's what happened in Greensboro, that's the end of the story, that there's a lot of things that happen in Greensboro, and there's a lot of things that are still happening in Greensboro, and people need to hear where somebody else is coming from and need to understand that they don't feel the way they do, and that they had a different perspective on it, and they see things differently, and to try to get sort of a dialogue going. So that's sort of more of a lead-in to some of the reconciliation dialogues that we want to have as part of our process as well.
Well, I'm glad to see that you are entertaining these multiple versions of perception of that particular day. Now, for those people who were just a little bit on the outside of this looking in and say, hey, but the truth was not written, if they're looking at newspaper reports or if they're looking at other documents, how do you deal with those people who are saying, hey, your documents aren't even true that you're looking at?
Well, that's true. And I mean, to some degree, and this is my anthropology thing too, is to some degree, written documents are, I treat as sort of another narrative. These are all sort of narratives that we are in some ways sort of stacking against each other and sort of thinking, okay, well, what do they have to gain or lose by viewing it this way? How credible is it? Are they in a position to know? And we don't take government documents or newspaper stories as the absolute truth. I mean, we do treat them as we would anybody's narrative, that they have certain perspectives, and reporters have perspectives, and editors have perspectives, and they're in a position to know certain things, and they're not in a position to know other things. And they have agendas, like people do. So I think that sort of figures into our whole perspective on this, is that we read these documents still with an eye to trying to corroborate some things, but also with an eye to using them as a way of figuring out, well, where's the media on this? Where were the reporters on this? What kind of pressure was there in the media at the time to portray things one way or another? And what were the consequences of that sort of portrayal? Or what were the different people who were giving testimony in these trial documents? If it's sworn testimony, so we hope that they're at least we hope they're telling the truth, but they're still also coming from a particular perspective. So we try to corroborate the facts, but we also take the perspective of it and sort of add it to our sort of collection of multifaceted stories that we're trying to assemble.
Have you run into a situation where you've read someone's statement from 1979 and then you talk to them now in 2005 and there is a different perception now than there was then? Sure,
yeah. I mean, I think most people, I don't know if you keep a diary, but if you did and you went back and you read what you wrote in 79, you'd probably think, I can't believe I thought that. But I think, most people sort of change their perspectives about things and change their feelings about things. And things, I've spoken to members from the CWP who now see things maybe in a different light, maybe think, that rhetoric was a little heated, or, if we knew then what we know now, maybe we would have done things differently. And a lot of people feel that way, that, at the time we thought this, but now, we feel different about it. And so I think that also has to come into play into what we're portraying. In terms of the facts, though, if somebody says, I was here on that day, but then what they said in 79 says that they were somewhere else, then we're going to go with what they said in 79, because that's just it tends to be a more accurate portrayal, because it was fresher, and everybody's memories decay over time. I mean, it's pretty well documented in terms of witness testimony that as time goes on, your memory of facts erodes, and that's, that happens to everyone. But I still think it's worth looking at how people have new perspectives on things, because I think that gets at what we're trying to do in terms of how does this affect Greensboro today, and how does it affect communities today? And people want different kinds of things than they wanted in '79. It was a different time. So.
Well, now that we've talked about how people's testimonies may change, and you as the research expert, do you see anything changing from how you handled the East Timor Commission to how you're handling research for the Greensboro's Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
Well, I think that, the amount of written material in Greensboro is considerably more voluminous than in East Timor. Part of what was going on in East Timor, it was complete blackout. People didn't know what was going on. There were very few trials happening, and the trials that were happening you can't really get access to those documents. So a lot of the written testimony isn't there. So in some ways, I think Greensboro has a leg up in research in that regard, because there's all these things that were from the time that were documented in incredible detail. If you could see these archives, there's a lot of paperwork in there. So to that degree, what we were working from in East Timor was really people's memories. There's some kinds of documentary evidence in terms of newspaper accounts, and people would take trips there, but they tended to be people who went there for a reason, because they had some very strong perspective or another. Either they were advocates for East Timor, or they were Indonesian employees, or whatever it was. They had a very strong issue that they were trying to look at. So in terms of the documentary evidence, we're certainly in a better position here. I think in terms of the overall sort of orientation towards the Truth Commission is certainly different here than it was there. In East Timor, of course, you had a brand new government. And so they were really pushing for a lot of reform. And the East Timor Commission was established by the UN. At that time, the United Nations was the government, because there wasn't a government in the immediate aftermath of the referendum. So the United Nations established the Truth Commission. So that obviously gave a bit more prestige to the Truth Commission, and we certainly didn't have to, argue with anybody about whether it was a good idea or not. I actually feel like in Greensboro, because it's such a grassroots effort, it means a lot more work for us now, because both from a financial point of view, also from a sort of PR, arguing about, should we have this commission, should we not have this commission? In East Timor, it was just there, and that was the end of the story. People didn't sort of overthink that. But I think because it's such a grassroots effort in Greensboro, I really do think it has the potential to have more legs. It has more of a potential to keep carrying after the mandate. And truth commissions have a very short lifespan. And if you don't have this buy-in of the community, then you can sort of write your report, write some recommendations, close up shop, and you're gone. And where do those recommendations go? Who has ownership of them? Who wants to pick them up and really give them some life and sort of push them forward? And I think that's where you have to really rely on civil society and the people who really want to see some change. And I think that it's harder work for commissioners and commission staff right now, because we have to really push and go out there and look for money and really convince people that this is a good thing. But I think in the long run, I think it has more potential than a lot of the other truth commissions.
Good, thank you. Now, with this one here, with this commission in Greensboro, I know that this is going to be the model for the United States. Now, tell me, do you have ideas about how this is going to work for other communities, or are you right now just working so hard here?
I have a hard time focusing among what's immediately on my desk on any given day. But I do think about it. As part of the reason I came to this from my East Timor experience is because I really felt like there's a lot of places where this could really do some good things in the U.S. And so I came to it for that reason, that I wanted to sort of get this ball rolling in the U.S. I think there's a lot of, from a research perspective, it would be great if we just had more staff and more people to sort of fan out and take all the statements, because at the moment we have more people wanting to give statements than we have people to go out and get them. So I think having more people, more bodies out there to get out there and do the research would be a tremendous thing. I actually really like the aspect of this Truth Commission, that it's very focused. One of the things that happens with Truth Commissions, and certainly happened in East Timor, is when you're writing the final report, there's this tremendous responsibility, this burden that you want to write you're supposed to find the truth, so you want to write this document that's so complete and so full of every truth that that you could possibly uncover, so you never feel like you've never finished your job. You're always kind of thinking of new things. Oh, I should put this in, and we should really have more detail here. So you can really kill yourself that way, because you'll just, there's not enough staff, there's not enough money, there's not enough time to do all that. And I think part of what you want to do is just show the outlines of what happened and the context of it. Context is everything. And but you don't want to sort of widen your frame too far and try to, we can't talk in Greensboro about everything that went wrong in the South. We have to stay really focused. So I think that would be, if I had to talk to somebody who's thinking of setting up a Truth Commission, that would be my major piece of advice, is to stay focused. Sort of think big, but stay focused, because you don't want to raise expectations too high about what you're going to find and what your capacity is to find, but you want to sort of get people excited about looking at these things in a really contextual way, and thinking about how the past connects to the future and to the present. That you're not just doing a sort of autopsy of the past. You're really trying to make it real and trying to connect people to past events and how it affects their lives.
Well, Dr. Harwell, we definitely thank you for coming and being a part of our show today. This has been a great interview, and I think a lot of people will get a great amount of information from this. This has been TRC Talk. I'm your host, Myra Sherd. We've been in the studio today with Dr. Emily Harwell, the Research Director for Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Thanks a lot for joining us, and remember, keep seeking truth and working for reconciliation.